Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of famous American cartoonists who could pass for gay in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. The show is brought to you today by Audible. Audible is offering Mr. Media listeners a free audiobook download and a free 14-day trial to give you a chance to check out their amazing service. You can choose a free audiobook from Audible's library of tens of thousands of titles, including today's top business bestsellers, such as The Big Idea by Donny Deutsch, Jay Elliott's The Steve Jobs Way, or even Shark Tales, How I Turned $1,000 into a billion-dollar business. You can even download the biography of a comic book and graphic novel legend, Will Eisner, called A Spirited Life, which I wrote and read. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/radio. Again, that's audibletrial.com/radio for your free audiobook. This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media radio interview with cartoonist Howard Cruse, whose latest book of collected comic strips is The Complete Wendell. Howard, welcome back. In this segment, I'm hoping you will show us a few things you've got carefully set up behind you on your drawing board.
Okay. Shall I travel to my workspace now?
Please do.
Here we go.
All right.
There. Now, this is
Where did you go? Oh, there you are. Hey.
Adjusting my iMac so that it will photograph me.
Okay. We got you.
So here I am at my drawing table.
All right. So what do you got there?
Well, you told me that as long as we were doing video that I should try to find things to show. Who knows whether these are interesting. This is the original artwork for the cover of the book. As you can see, these days I do all of my coloring digitally in Photoshop. So there's the finished book, and here's the artwork for it.
Right.
And let's see, what else have I got here? Mementos. This was, I was going through my artifact file, and this shows a little bit about how I work. This is an example of the earliest stage of any of my writing. I don't know if this will show, but this is basically just notes in pencil on a rough pencil grid that where I just get the first notion of what I'm going to put on a comic book page, and then I in the days of Wendell and all of my underground comic stuff, that was all that was necessary to get started with the drawing. With Stuck Rubber Baby, my graphic novel, it was necessary to lay a more careful structure for the whole book. So in that case, I actually went from pencil notes to a series of typed scripts until I arrived at a working script for the whole book.
Got it.
But for shorter things, that's not really necessary. I just cut the Strathmore illustration board to size and let it sit there empty until I visualize what will go where, and then I start drawing. That's my way of working.
I guess, Howard, being professional at this is something that, being a layman, I always wonder about with the artist. You've got, in this case, you had 2 pages for Wendell. So you would start up here, and you'd be telling your story, and then you'd go to the second page. Did you ever get down to here, and then, you know what, I needed more space, and I got to go back, or did you have it mapped out well enough that didn't happen?
To avoid that exact thing, I would do panels in various places. I would take the most crucial panels, the ones that had the most vivid action or needed more space, and usually, the beginning and ending. I mean, I had basically planned the strip, so I knew how it was going to begin and how it was going to end. And then I would draw a panel here and a panel here, and those were the places where I knew I had to hit those marks in the course of the 2 pages. I mean, for example, here's one of the 2-page strips. As you can see, I draw big.
Yeah.
And let's see if they can.
No, we're good. We're good.
But anyway, I might draw this panel, and I wrote this. Here's an action-filled panel. Mm-hmm. That's one that I want to make sure that I have plenty of room for. Ones that are basically dialogue. It's easier to manipulate the sizes and composition late in the game. But that way, there's basically no way that I'm going to suddenly discover that I'm on the wrong track after, the way I might if I was just drawing panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, panel 5. That's my way of working. I don't know how other cartoonists work. I don't live near other cartoonists. We don't compare our working methods.
You don't all know each other. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And this is one of the old tabloid pages. These things were so large to draw that essentially they were too big for one sheet of Strathmore board. I had to do it on 2 separate sheets, and I had to hinge it for carrying it into the photostat shop in New York, where I would have them reproduced to send to the Advocate. So this is sort of held together by a piece of tape on the back. And because I literally didn't have a portfolio that was large enough.
Who would? That's pretty big.
And let's see, when I was in the early days, the first few episodes of the strip, when the Advocate and I were getting to know each other, I did what you usually do when you're looking to publish something. I did a sketch version. So this is an example of this, the rough sketch of a Wendell episode from the early days. And then if they were, if that was approved by the Advocate editors, then I would go ahead and do the finished artwork. Now, after, I think, 4 episodes, they decided, hey, you're doing fine. We trust you. Just send in the finished script. We don't have to approve it ahead of time. So that was gracious of them and made it simpler for me. So I don't have sketch versions.
All right, so Howard, what else do you have on your table there for us?
Well, I have the one time that Wendell was on the cover of the Advocate, when it had been there had been this 1.5 year interruption because the magazine changed formats. And so anyway, when it came back, they did this nice Wendell's back cover to herald its return. And I also have, in this case, I did send a sketch because magazine covers are important.
Yeah.
But let's see what else. Oh, and oddball things. This was a rough pencil layout of Wendell and Ollie's apartment. I realized after I'd done the series for a while that while I was not a stickler for realism, I did need to have some sense of, okay, so how many rooms are in their apartment and how's the bathroom laid out and other things. So finally I started trying to put together the floor plan of the apartment so I could have some reasonable level of consistency.
Did you make sure that they always slept on the same side of the bed?
I think when I showed them in bed, one was usually on top of the other.
Oh. Oops.
And this is the Spanish. There was a 2-part Spanish edition.
Oh, cool.
Of Wendell. That's the only translation we've had so far. We almost had one in French, but it fell apart when the publisher somehow forgot that it was supposed to send in advance. And
gee, I don't imagine that happens very often.
Yeah, well, it was frustrating because everything until then was going like gangbusters, and the translation was already in the works. I'm still hoping that the Stuck River Baby has had 4 translations, and the 5th one is in the works. And I would love to spread Wendell around. Of course, it is very American. I mean, it relates to specifically the climate of America in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. So not only might other readers in other countries have to adjust their creativity to understand what it was like in America in those days, but, I'm still wondering with young people who get this complete Wendell collection, will be able to put their heads back in the mindset of what it was like when America was much more overtly hostile um, to gay
Mm-hmm.
people. Not to mention when there was an epidemic going on where, people who were 21 and 22 were walking around looking like skeletons because of the ravages of AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very different time from the scene now, but it was also a very bracing time because it was a great sense of community because we were embattled. Gay people basically had to, put aside differences within the subculture and fight homophobia and AIDS overtly. And consequently, the morale within the community was about as good as it can be when people are dying. Um, I think I was very proud of my community during that period. I feel like we rose to the occasion in a really creative way.
Well, Howard, we're almost out of time. I'm just kind of curious, what are you working on today?
Well, actually, I've had a rash of old work being collected. I mean, there's this book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it looks like there's a good chance that there will be a book collection of my non-gay work. As you may recall, the last time we spoke, the occasion for that was my book collection of the gay-themed comics
Mm-hmm.
over a period of 32 years, called From Headrack to Claude. And now we don't, the contract isn't signed, so I don't want to say much about it, but uh, I'm optimistic at the moment. It looks like that there will be this other book. So that involves a lot of sort of retouching artwork that's gotten beaten up over the years, and a certain amount of work that goes into that. And in the back of my mind are, other questions that I talked about in my last interview where, different ways I could go. Should I do a web comic? Should I do a novel? Should I do a play? All these things are kind of simmering, but right on the front burner right now is going back and trying to make my old work publishable.
Well, the important thing I think is keep working, keep busy, keep producing.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't gone to the rocker
No.
yet.
Well, folks, listen. You can order Howard Cruse's latest book, The Complete Wendell, from great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it online right now at mrmedia.com at a great price. And you can learn more about cartoonist Howard Cruse and his work at his website, howardcruse.com. It's Howard and then Cruse.com. Howard, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.
Same here.
Thank you so much for joining us again on Mr. Media today.
Well, thanks for having me on your
My
show.
pleasure.
Take care.
All right. And folks, for more original interviews with your favorite American cartoonists, surf over to our main website, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen, as Howard does, with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, a comment on today's show, or would like to advertise on Mr. Media Radio, please email me directly at bob@mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. You can also follow me and the show on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate you giving up a little piece of your day and spending it with us. Thanks for watching,
Same.
everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.